Hello, this is Elsie Kelly, Liu Ling Chen. I am currently going for my PhD program, working on my dissertation at Tsinghua University in Beijing. And today I would like to give a trial lesson. I'm hoping that this will upload onto the internet here from Beijing, preferably via VPN, though, well, that is up to the internet gods. The lesson that I have today is actually from Bard High School Early College's electives curriculum from fall of 2018. The class was titled Dried Inkwells on Contemporary Chinese Art, and the lesson is actually the first artist we introduced in a series of 16, including contemporary Chinese artists with international impact, as well as the last four are Chinese American artists with considerable social and humane impact as well. The first artist we introduce is actually a very controversial figure who is in exile, and that being Ai Weiwei. So, without much further ado, I'll give the lecture. However, none of my lectures actually last more than 20 minutes, with plenty of time for interactive exchange, class discussions, and of course, in some cases, working in the show and tell of the homework assignment of the previous weekend. So I will also leave room for that, and let's see where we get to. This, of course, I'll send you the corresponding PowerPoint that I am looking at while giving the lecture. This class is actually on socialist realism and social critique. The first assignment is actually from the weekend. Our previous class was actually on the introduction of socialist realism in contemporary Chinese art. And for the homework assignment, students, and this would be high school, early college students, were asked to, in socialist realist style, do either a drawing or a poster or use Photoshop to piece together a great propaganda poster in true socialist realist fashion in praise of our current President Donald Trump. I'm sure he would love that. But this, of course, demonstrates that the students' understanding of the key elements of socialist realist praise. So, first part of our class is usually show and tell. Every student shows off their work, and they usually had a lot of fun doing this, after which we roll into our chapter by introducing, first of all, who Ai Weiwei was, that his father, Ai Qing, was a famous poet, and because of his literati status, he was persecuted during the Cultural Revolution, and that Weiwei himself worked actually on the Olympic Stadium alongside Swiss architects Herzog and de Meuron. However, despite his work on the famous 2008 Olympic Stadium, nevertheless, he was opposed to the idea of gentrification and especially eradicating old neighborhoods or forcibly removing the local residents so that a new shining city can be built to look good or save face. So we move into his works. The first part is actually showing the first 15 minutes of his 2012 documentary film, Never Sorry, which gives a very clear introduction of who he is, his work, and him being under house arrest. Then we move along to his work. The the first piece that caught international attention actually was his dropping of the Neolithic vase captured in pictures, which, of course, I realize that as I'm giving the video, you can't see the PowerPoint. I hope you can actually have the PowerPoint in front of you, which is usually on the projector as I'm telling the students. One of the previous assignments had also been for students to find Ai Weiwei's works and be able to introduce them. So for our lectures, it is always interactive, and whenever I show a work, the first of Ai Weiwei's works has always been chosen by at least one student in the room. So once the slide shows their work, and I asked, of course, students to send in their work prior to Sunday night, so that while I'm preparing my lectures, I know which works to insert, and when I get there, the students who have selected that work has the run of the mill, if you will actually describe what the work is, the background, etc., and then I'll fill in the blanks after. So since there are no students nor student input here, well, let's get on with it, shall we? So Ai Weiwei's coming out piece, if you will, was picture, still frame, of him dropping a Neolithic vase, a Han Dynasty, or even a Han Dynasty vase from almost 2,000 years ago. And the idea is pretty crystal clear, that you are breaking tradition, ancient Chinese tradition, in order to make something new, something unrecognizable, something modern. But at what cost? Some of his more recent noticeable pieces, including a long snake of backpacks. And the snake, of course, symbolizes poison, symbolizes a danger, even a hidden danger, whereas the backpacks symbolize the number of lost lives. Elementary school students who were killed in the Wenchuan earthquake because of shoddy masonry by contractors and subcontractors who use subpar or the tofu dregs, doufu zha, construction material, or the cheapest, the lowest bidder, in order to make the most money, but in doing so made elementary schools that pretty much crumpled over like a deck of cards during an earthquake. So the backpacks during the snake, or some of the snakes which circled around an entire room during an installation or coiled on top of the ceiling, each backpack is to represent one child lost. And there was not a single, to this day, there's not a single number that tabulates all of the lost children from the Wenchuan earthquake due to faulty governmental construction. The next piece is actually on the side of a museum, and they are colorful backpacks that are pieced together in order to spell out in Chinese characters, "She had only lived on this earth for 7 years." And the top is, you can see on the side of the museum as cars are passing by. They can see the Chinese characters made of backpacks, each backpack representing an individual student whose life was lost. And the documentary Never Sorry actually shows that. The first part shows Weiwei going in with his camera crew to interview individual villagers who had lost children. The documentary, of course, is in Chinese. There wasn't subtitles, the version we had, and usually I did a running or a simultaneous translation for our students at BARD Baltimore. The next introductory piece, and this was actually at the end of the Socialist Realism chapter, is the painting of the individual ceramic sunflower seeds. And there were 100,000 of these sunflower seeds, which debuted at the Tate Museum in London, covering the entire museum floor. So much so that Ai Weiwei is offering a bunch of them to the audience. Um, People could go in and they can actually stand on the entire bed, or rather, the entire floor is filled with these individually painted sunflower seeds. Which, of course, leads. This is if you will, a trailer or something to whet the appetites for the next week's chapter, which we'll move right into. So the first image here is actually of Ai Weiwei standing in the middle of tree roots. How I begin the lesson is by having students, once again, describe what they see. And of the 2 semesters we've had, of the 60 students I've had for this class, no one ever chose this particular image, and it's one that I usually begin with. I understand no one chose it also because of its complexity and not knowing what people are looking at. And the image is of Ai Weiwei standing in the middle of old tree roots that have been cut, and on the walls are pictures. Now, what you're actually looking at, the tree roots are true, and it's the representation of roots of things that can no longer branch out because they are dead. They are cut out. They're cut off from anything that is living. There is no longer the chance for them to continue. And this is also, the show was put together beginning at the 1-year anniversary of the Wenchuan earthquake of 2008. On the walls are actually lots of people, and each of these persons within a picture, they took a documentary, and on the 1-year anniversary read a name of one child who was lost during the earthquake. And the picture, of course, are of an international crowd, and they are all reading one name so that one child is never forgotten. And these are the pictures of them reading this circling around an entire room of dead tree roots. Moving on. Once again, this lecture starts for my classes usually on a Monday. And before Sunday night, I asked all of my students who actually wanted to get a top grade to send me an image. They didn't even have to say anything, just send me one image of a piece by Ai Weiwei they would like to include in a lecture. And their homework actually for the high school or college students, in college this would be a 100 or 200 level course. All they had to do to prepare for class discussion is to give me, of course, the factual, the year when the piece came out, but also their own take. What is the takeaway they have from that? And of course, I'm quite familiar with the art critique out there, and I don't allow them to mimic or parrot somebody else's words. I want them to describe the artwork using their own words and also the emotions or what they feel the artwork is about. So when I show the slides, I include all of their choices, and of course, once there's choice, they get to go and speak first about the piece, and then I go. In terms of sunflower seed piece, because I've given quite a introduction from the previous week, I specifically asked my students to leave that piece for me and choose one of the many individual pieces that Weiwei has done over the years. Okay, the image that's in front of me, or that would be on the projector behind the students, would be Weiwei throwing the sunflower seeds up in the air while standing among the 100,000 sunflower seeds. And this has been traveling around, and actually these sunflower seeds, people could buy them at the museum stores. Each of these seeds were individually painted, and each of them was actually, when they were made, it's white. It's clean ceramic. There's no markings. And there are people, workers he's paid, some of his friends, visitors, museum people, collectors, etc., who went in and individually hand painted the stripes on these sunflower seeds. For each one can represent an individual person. It is unique, and yet when placed together among such a sea of sunflower seeds, who can tell who is and is not unique? If you actually painted a sunflower seed, how can you tell that one is yours or where yours is in a bed of 100,000? When I visited Weiwei's studio when this piece was being put together, I painted two of those sunflower seeds. One of them I deliberately painted with a smiley face, and the other one I left and asked people to leave it intentionally blank. Um, in terms of the interview, one of the interviews says this is perhaps the most costly work, and I'm quoting here, among all artworks, both Chinese and Western. That's what Ai Weiwei said. The layers of seeds, though simple in form, embody multiple meanings. The sunflower seed is a common street snack in China, an everyday object from the artist's childhood. In fact, today, if you go to the supermarket, there are still bags of sunflower seeds. Families usually go through it by the bags full. At nighttime, something to snack on as they watch TV. The next set of imagery are pictures. They're some of Ai Weiwei's earliest works, and they require him simply taking a picture with his right hand and flipping off some structure, usually a governmental structure or a famous monument, with his left hand. Of course, this goes back to Ai Weiwei's experience that he spent 9 years in New York in his adult life as a young artist. So the flipping something, the bird, of course, is an American gesture. In China, today, of course, in China, did that people know the meaning and them still be fighting words. In the 1970s or 80s, that did not mean really anything, unless you were from one of the cities with more Western influence, such as Hong Kong or Macau. Aside from those cities, most people did not know what the middle finger meant. In fact, even today, because the middle finger is the most extended from the body, people use the middle finger to point to things all the time in China. It does not mean that you are actually giving someone the finger as it does in the States. In Ai Weiwei's case, however, this is purely intentional, of him giving the finger to a number of houses of power as protest. Now, I might also remind that this class covers, since it is a art class on art, on contemporary Chinese art, there are a lot of themes which are rather mature for early college and for college students. Instead of dancing around the issue, I prefer to address it head on, because it is a serious issue that should be addressed. It is not one to be sugar-coated, nor to be censored because of its complexity. I believe in addressing the issue and taking the students along in the steps to face it as maturely and as fully as possible, instead of simply avoiding and in doing so being deliberately misled or misrepresented. So this series of pictures, and it has him flipping off Tiananmen Square and flipping off the shining image of Hong Kong across the ocean. And of course, I have a class discussion with inner city kids from Baltimore. Of course, the class discussion naturally goes to the political taint, which usually leads to a very good, heavy discussion. The next set of image starts off with Ai Weiwei's famous dropping of the Han vase. a Han vase that at the time he purchased his from the antique market in Beijing, Panjiayuan Curios Market, at the time for several hundred RMB, which at the time was around $25. That same vase, or rather one from the same time period today, if you were to so lucky or fortunate to find an authentic one anywhere, first of all, it would be protected under the Artifacts Act by the Chinese government. If you were to find one on sale, it would run you probably around 30,000 RMB, give or take, roughly $3,000 to $4,000. Okay. That having been said, the next set shows what he has done to many of these ancient Neolithic and Han Dynasty vases. The first one, of course, is painted with acrylic outside Coca-Cola. The discussion usually leads to, and students get there long before I need to explain it, that the Western imagery, the Western commercialized products are covering or concealing or simply drowning out the old classical Chinese symbols, icons, relics, histories. The next set, of course, Neolithic vases dipped in bright colored acrylics. Speaking of acrylics and ceramics, the next one is actually one of Weiwei's more recent works with the blue and white kind of the Tang Dynasty classical ceramics, except with imageries of tanks, of war, of modern strife and conflict. The next set is another social issue. In this, it is shows Ai Weiwei's background in architecture. In this case, it is a bunch of stools that have been placed together so that only 4 to 6 contacts are on the ground, whereas all the other stools are placed together in this delicate balance of being attached to previous to other existing stools, so they're all suspended in the air. This is also seen with a room full of stools, some of which 2 or 3 stools share the same 3 legs. Another one was found at his studio, and this is a picture that was taken in 2004 of a table with 2 legs on the ground and 2 legs on the wall. Can you still call it a table? A similar set of works actually are bicycles, where bicycles, 2 bicycles flipped on top of each other, or even 3 or 4 bicycles having shared wheels, which can also be placed in the room. So large is the installation that it has enough room for for an 8-foot giant of a man or person to pass through. And here is the social issue I usually explain, and this is a disclaimer. The next image is rather shocking, not for the faint of heart. What it is the concept of the rat king, which is a naturally occurring phenomenon in nature, where rats, an entire pack or an entire litter of rats, are born with their tails attached to each other. So that if this group had one rat who died and their tails are still attached, everybody else in that pack has to carry the dead person or dead rat's weight. So, if this is true of society, that means the entire society, the group, has to bear the burden. That even if 1 or 2, or the proverbial iron rice bowl of the 1980s, if people are not holding their weight, then everybody else has to pull together and pull their weight. Now, when is that balance toppled over? When do you have the majority no longer pulling weight with only 1 or 2 people or 2 rats pulling the weight? When is that burden too heavy? too great for just one alive soul to carry the weight of everyone else who has died. That is a social argument. Next set is the bronze heads of the zodiac animals. And using that, of course, is the explain the work from May 5th, 2011, meaning of Ai Weiwei's 12 zodiac heads, as published by Malcolm Moore in the Art News. And this, of course, harkens to a reminder of the old summer palace that was destroyed in 1860 during the Second Opium War. I also show here a drawing of what the old summer palace looked like according to the blueprints and records found in the Imperial Archives in the Forbidden City. That this was actually designed by French Jesuit priest and inventor Ferdinand Verbaest. And of course, the wreckage of what remains today as a shame to China of of the Western imperialism and what it leaves in its wake. If time allows, I also include what 4 of these heads actually cost today and how they were auctioned recently by Sotheby's, and the modernization of China and business people finding it their duty, and of course for a contemporary Chinese public honor to be able to bid for one of these heads and return it to China after it being stolen and pillaged from the old summer palace. The next set of imagery are 2 bowls, and it seems like rice bowls. And in Ai Weiwei studios in Beijing, he had a studio in Beijing. He had one actually at the entrance hall where visitors could put their hands in, and it's cool to the touch. And I have students guess what they are. It definitely looks like the symbolism of rice bowls. What they are is actually a large bowl of pearls. On the subject of pearls, or things from the sea, from the ocean, the next installation is, of course, these are ceramic crabs. Why crabs? Since the search committee is for teaching Chinese, why crabs? What is the significance of crabs to contemporary Chinese culture? 比如说，大家如果现在打字，那为什么要打出来河蟹呢？这河蟹跟现代中国的发展有何关系呢？河蟹其实呢是个谐音，是和谐社会的谐音。So 和谐 second tone, 和谐 fourth tone. If you're typing very quickly just by pinyin, by phonetics, if you're typing 河蟹, the most common appearance will still be river crab. However, second tone, 和谐, is what the government, contemporary Chinese government, wants of their society, to have balance, to maintain social order. Ai Weiwei's publish of 和谐, of river crabs, is actually a social commentary on the falsehood of governmental, can't we just all get along? Well, the next slide shows his beautiful, just complete Shanghai studio, followed within a week by its destruction and tear down of the Chinese government, who said it was built illegally, once again because he was no longer in favor with the higher-ups. So, this crumbling, destroyed building is the understanding of 和谐 and 和谐. Can't we all just get along? Next image shows a tiger being shot full of arrows. And since the discussion by students, usually this lecture takes a span of 2 and sometimes 3 days, depending on student feedback and how much or how little research they did on the pieces they need to talk about. For this section, to show the anti-poaching campaign as a social issue, a tiger filled with arrows, or actually several tigers in a large space, all filled with arrows. There were 3 video clips that I show of contemporary Chinese poaching, anti-contemporary Chinese poaching, including by the World Wildlife Federation, and one that was headed by Rockets or Chinese basketball star Yao Ming. Next image also shows some of the wild game meats that are cooked or poached and sold to visitors. Next shows the tiger balms and tiger liquor, allegedly to boost virility, mostly in men, though of course the advertisement says women, though there is no scientific proof that it boosts anything except people's egos. Next image shows trapped animals that were rescued, including 2 of the small black sun bears and cages of monkeys. And next image shows tiger balm products, which were originally part of Chinese medicine. They're mixed into a paste and rubbed into joints to relieve or to alleviate joint pain. However, there is very little proof that this actually works, but the items are still being sold. In fact, they were only pulled off the American market in 2014. These images I searched for and found from before 2014, and some of them are from either Amazon or Walmart. Next part are another address of the tigers is ceramic, old ceramic pieces with tigers. Some are broken, bones shattered, and they were all displayed how important tiger had been to Chinese society. Next image shows a group of, no, not llamas, alpacas, because it's not a llama but an alpaca. They are very similar, though of course I'll spare you the details of their biological differences. This is actually the title of a piece by Ai Weiwei, which shows a great number of patterns. It looks like beautiful patterns on the walls until you look close and realize they're all images of surveillance equipment, placed neatly to look like flowers, but clearly to show that Big Brother is ever watching. In fact, China today has the most number of public surveillance material anywhere in the world, which of course has also solved quite a number of crimes if you give away some of the privacy. Next image is a large woodblock, smooth woodblock carving of China and Taiwan. When we had museum and curatorial groups visit his studio in 2007-2008, that tiny little island, the strip that is Taiwan, kept getting knocked over by people who simply do not look at it or simply did not see it alongside the larger image that is China. So much so that they've actually had one of the studio workers take that and put it aside and put it back out again once people are beginning to leave. Take that what you will. For the symbolism, I'll leave that entirely up to you. Next one is the hollowed out, a large tree being placed together, and the hollowed out part in the middle is for China and the islands of Hainan on the south and southeast Taiwan. Next one is Ai Weiwei standing alone in his studio. the wood shop among frames, and of course, a supported old tree root. Next one is a chandelier. It's an upside down chandelier with a ladder going straight into it and therefore destroying the chandelier. Of course, this is commentary on social issue yet again. Next one is from Ai Weiwei's Twitter when he had it. He still has his Twitter, and it shows that artists, Beijing artists who are being evicted, and for Ai to help them sell off a lot of their stuff in order to address that the artists whose works were no longer in favor with the government. I know I'm strapped for time, so I'll make this go through the rest as quickly as possible. Next set deals with refugees. A large bronze statue of a boat full of refugees. Some of them are usually with life jackets, faceless, and face down. And of course, a poster of Ai face down on a beach somewheres in order to address this issue. And one of him taking a selfie in New York with a vandalized sign in the back that reads, "No one is illegal." And with what's going on with politics, with the caging of children, well, this also leads to heavy discussion in the classroom. Now we move on to the last section, Alcatraz. I usually, because of time, I'll spare you the details, give you a brief history of Alcatraz, and of course, Ai Weiwei's show there. Now, the premise of the show is that he could display and use the buildings in Alcatraz, but because Alcatraz is a national park, it is protected. You cannot drill into the walls. In other words, anything that you actually display in the buildings at Alcatraz, it has to be non-permanent, which means that you had to use clever ways to put together an installation that is not permanent that will still draw attention. In the main room, Weiwei actually used a kite, a multi-section kite, giant dragon head, very colorful, that meanders through the entire ceiling, kind of like his snakes did, which was an echo at the Cheryl Haynes Gallery in San Francisco Midtown. The other part is that he used Lego blocks, and usually, saving time, usually I have students guess what the the images were made from. They're used Lego blocks, and there are 2.6 million Lego blocks on the ground, and they designed this, and the Lego blocks are actually placed together in the imageries of all those political exiles around the world. And the Lego tiles are spread out so that people can walk through them, recognize the different international figures who are imprisoned or under house arrest because they spoke out against their local authoritative governments. At the end of the hallway, it's a pigeonholed desk, one of those old roll-up desks, in which are postcards so that visitors could write to one of these people and send it to the prisons to show support. For even if all of these letters are burned, at least the people here now who went through this show at Alcatraz are aware of all of these different political prisoners. And an echo of the kite display at a local mall in Singapore. Of course, with all of these great exhibitions, it's also important to pay attention to the people who brought them together. So a special tribute, if you will, or a shout out to the head of the Foresight Foundation and his San Francisco gallery owner, Cheryl Haynes, who actually made all of this possible. The Alcatraz show took them 3 years from um, from the initial idea on the go all the way to fruition when the show debuted. And each day is met with so many permits being applied for, national permits, state parks, make sure everything was right down to insurance, etc. Um, as for myself, I am not an artist, nor was I an art major. However, I worked for many years as a translator, including during this time period with Ms. Haynes for another artist that whom she represents in Beijing. So I was able to see firsthand some of these the hard work, the detail, the hard work, and the multiple emails, phone calls, and contacts that were made in order to put something like this together. And I absolutely have respect for Cheryl for putting together such a show, and I know that she is continuing to work with Weiwei internationally on many of his recent exhibitions. In fact, I was joking with her, I was translating for a different project, that wouldn't be fun if Weiwei could be shepherded. At the time he was under house arrest in China. If he could actually be somehow smuggled through private plane, show up in San Francisco for the press release by holding onto the bars and having the headlines for the Chronicle or even the New York Times to read, "Dissident Chinese artist escapes China only to land in American jail." Unfortunately, he did not make it to his debut throughout the entire time in Alcatraz, as Mr. I was still imprisoned under house arrest in China. The last picture is one from 2004. It's when yours truly went and visited with Mr. I in his studio. After which, of course, the last slide on this show is an introductory or next artist we look at, which is Sui Jianguo. The homework is Sleep of Reason and asking for input from students on what the details are. Thank you for your time and thank you for your consideration. I sincerely hope that using VPN from Beijing, I'm able to upload this video. Have a good time, and we'll see you again.